Good afternoon. My name is Steve Havey. I'm the chairman of the Personnel Committee, and today is the May 5th Personnel Committee meeting, and I'd like to call that to order. First on the agenda is a roll call.
Mr. Havey?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mrs. Burdick? Here. Mr. Graves?
Here.
Mr. Ricky?
Here.
Mrs. Root? Here. Mr. Stockin?
Here.
Mr. Crandall?
Here.
8 members present.
Thank you. First on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from April 7. Huh? Mrs. Root?
Is there an echo in here?
It appears to be. And Mr. Graves? Any corrections or amendments to this? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's carried. April 21st minutes, please. Mr. Stockin and Mr. Ricky. Any corrections? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That's done. Next item we have the county clerk, Mr. Rob Chrisman. He has requested, can I distill this down? Okay, what we're going to be doing, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is we're going to be taking a part-time person and making them full-time in the final analysis. You could help me on that, Mr. Chrisman.
Actually, I was got a clarification today from the personnel officer. You have hit the nail right on the head, because both those positions were full-time positions. They just were never used in that capacity. One was used as an intern, the other one was used as a part-time. So basically all we're doing for the current part-timer is going to make her full-time and never use the other position at this point. So it'll just be
Okay,
part-time to full-time.
thank you. Could we have a motion to
I'll move it,
move for
Mr. Chairman.
discussion?
Second.
Mr. Graves and Mr. Harris. Okay, questions and things for Mr. Chrisman?
Is part-time filled right now with a person?
It is, and she was grandfathered under the old program, so she had a full slate of benefits. So this isn't really changing that status much.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And
Mr. Harris.
the 90-day intern position is
I'm-
vacant and has been vacant for some
Will be
time?
vacant until you approve it, and I'm not gonna be bringing that forward.
Okay, so we're not voting to abolish that.
No, because it was never really it was always a full-time position. I just used it as a 90-day. So, no, it's not abolished. At your flexibility, if the world changed, I would have to come in front of you again and say hello.
Does this meet the approval of the county administrator?
It does. It's really not adding a lot of money. It's just salary. As Mr. Chrisman said, this person already earns benefits even though they're part-time. They've been here so long. They were here prior to the change in insurance, so they're grandfathered in and receive insurance as a part-time person. This is similar to a request that we just approved for the treasurer's office where Ms. Ross has a part-time person and she's asking for that to be filled full-time in the future. As that's a vacancy, this is someone that's already there and looking to add hours. So, and Mr. Crispin, as he said, is not going to be filling another position that he probably was spending the money on in previous budget years for those hours anyways. So I think it's a wash in the end on this.
Yeah, Mr. Healy.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Question for the county clerk. Mr. Chrisman, can you explain, because the listening public probably doesn't understand, and maybe some of the people here in the audience don't understand or know what index clerk does. Can you tell us what their duties are a little bit?
Well, we've had multiple since 1807. So what they do is every document that you get recorded, every civil litigation that you have submitted, everything, once it gets past the legal aspect of the recordability, has to be put into a format that is going to be easily retrievable. And it has to meet the requirements that were very similar in 1807 when it was the pen and the quill. Now we do it digitally. So and it has to be done with a high level of proficiency. So the individual who does that, if it's just think of all the different ways your names can be indexed. It can be last name, first name, a junior, not junior, corporations, trust, all these things. And we have a huge list of what we call protocols and procedures. We also have, just to give you an idea, we have a blind verification program. Once my index clerk puts that in based on the document, my vendor never sees what they put in. They look at the same document and they put it in. If the two methods of indexing aren't correct, it's called the reconciliation, then one of my deputies has to verify who made the error, or do we have to change the protocol to make sure that we're seeing something new. But just think, what they did in 1807 is the same thing we're doing in 2020, digital versus the pen and quill. You have to have a high level of proficiency. So the big thing what this index clerk's going to do is also doing a, what we call them appropriations. Back when all the highways were appropriated through eminent domain, probably a word you're familiar with,
I've heard of it.
all those roads were taken. Well, they never were put against the landowners that owned the parcel adjacent to them. So they were very difficult for people to search, but the maps were impeccable. So we got the project that was done by the intern is going to be included with the index clerk. They're going through every map, thousands of maps, and they look at each name that was adjacent to that road, and they're indexing the name. So in 1810, when the Plank Road was made in Alfred, those appropriations, names are going in the system because those surveys can be used by everybody. And I got them so that they're out there. So that's the big part of the project that has not been done since last March, because the intern that I had, Jared Joyce, he was doing that and his family had COVID and he had to quit, and we haven't replaced that. So what I'm doing now is taking away the intern position. Basically, I'm not going to utilize that. I'm going to do a full-time index clerk who's going to do the indexing and that special project.
Thank you.
I got a follow-up if I could.
Yes, please.
So you stated that we now do this digitally instead of doing it by hand with pen and paper.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is obviously a lot more efficient doing it digitally.
As long as the inputs are correct, because garbage in, garbage out. Now, we have a 3-step verification. Once that's indexed, the deputies verify that index inputs against the document, and then we have our vendor do it. So that's 3 times that document, because think of this, if it's done wrong, it's never found. And that can't be an issue.
Is this the only index clerk position you have?
Yes.
In your office? Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Chrisman? Hearing none, I will call the question. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you, Mr. Chrisman.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, we have our county administrator, Mrs. Knapp, and she has a salary study she'd like to speak to.
Yes, thank you very much. Salary study is something I've looked into recently. I began doing that back in December. It's a conversation that took place in ad hoc that, we were examining the efficiencies and effectiveness of some of our approval processes for positions. And when we look at the non-unit in Section 4, those are board determinations. They're not anything that we're bound by collective bargaining agreement salary schedules on. So you have the ability to make independent adjustments throughout your tenure to each position on non-unit in Section 4. And when I've looked over the course of your tenure, you've made about 50 adjustments. That seems to be typical for any board, so that's nothing atypical. However, each time you do that, it's tough to weigh the value of that change as to every other position on those schedules. So an independent salary schedule would give us a plan where we know the comparative worth of each position to another one, and you don't have to think about each decision. You plot the request within the plan. I did look at what every other county was doing. There was a listserv of county administrators that was going around in the fall, around Christmas time as well, about what counties were doing, who was using this, what services were being used. It looked like Don Jacobs was a name that was being used by the majority of the counties that recently did this. Two of the counties had put out an RFP. He was successful in winning that RFP. I was familiar with Don. He had done another project for us. I called him and just picked his brain a little bit about the project, what he was doing for these other counties, and he submitted some preliminary work to me, and I asked him to do a proposal, what I've attached to this. So I am asking that we move forward with this. The proposal not only does a salary study, you could add two other components to it. One would be reviewing all of our personnel policies and updating them and providing a personnel manual for us, which would be a great help, I believe, all the way around. And I know we've spoken, the personnel office is a little short-staffed, and this would, get them up to speed on some things without adding staff, and allowing them to concentrate their staff on the projects that we're currently working on. And the other thing would be a performance review system, which is something we've talked about. We have an old one. It's pretty outdated. How do you grade department heads and other non-unit people to know how they can improve? And this would provide a plan for that. So those are the two add-ons. It would be included in the study in the total price of $30,000. Now, the base price for the study was for 65 positions. That did not include any of our stipends. So, we provide stipends for different things like public information officer, for deputy budget officer, those things. We could ask for them to be included in this. Any new positions, we just talked in public safety about a possible paralegal. That might be something that we'd want to include. And I think I could just ask Don if we wanted to include some other positions, how that would change the price. I could work that out prior to coming in for a resolution.
So with the two add-ons, right now the price I'm seeing in front of me is 30,000?
Yes, it's 20,000 for the salary study, and then the two add-ons totaled another 10.
That's 30K.
And I think I put that right at the bottom. I am sorry, that is, let me add that up here. 28, not 30, I'm sorry.
See, we're saving money already.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Oh. Mrs. Burdick.
I have 3 or 4 questions, I guess.
Sure.
Number one, is this in the budget?
It is not something we budgeted for. I did put money in my budget for special projects. However, we are using some of that for our labor attorney as we move forward with negotiations and some other matters. So I don't have enough money in my fees to pay for this total. We do have more money in contingency we can add towards this, and I'd feel pretty comfortable using that.
Once they do the salary study, who would decide if we accepted those pay raises or decreases, and how would they be determined? And then when would they take effect?
So the salary study, my understanding is you get a final report, a final plan, and then you choose to adopt that or not as your plan. Moving forward, you would put new hires in those positions, and if there were positions you felt the need to move upward or downward, you would do that as your budget could handle it. So, for instance, if you saw one that needed to come up a great deal, maybe you wasn't available to do it in your budget this year, maybe you would look at it for next year. Just approving the plan would not require you to make changes right off the bat. The other thing I want to make note of is that New York State is doing a comprehensive study of all civil service positions that mirrors this. So we're in the middle of doing surveys for that. That is a requirement by Governor Cuomo. And I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve of looking at these positions as well, because if we're looking at civil service in the next 2 or 3 years, there could be changes there. I would hate to leave these out of similar changes.
Okay, one more quick question. What is our dollar threshold for quotes or bids? Does this have to be? Does it have to be gotten a quote from?
It does not, because it is a professional service. If it was not a professional service, it was something ordinarily you would need, for this level, you probably would need to do an RFP for it. But because it's a professional service, you do not.
Mr. Graves.
Chris, I'm having trouble wrapping myself around this again. Basically, I have a phobia against studies. I don't think they serve the purpose. It might be well-intended or whatever, but I think sometimes it's just it uses a cover to get from point A to point B. What I'm wondering here is about how this would improve on the present system, the present way that we're doing things. And I'd ask if you could describe how we're currently doing business, how we're arriving at these salaries, the amounts, and how it contrasts with what you're proposing.
I would say right now, we just kind of take, I don't want to say a shot in the dark, but we take the best information that we have on hand, which might not always be the best. I'll take the county administrator position. So we had that filled with Mr. Boyd at right around 100,000. The next hire came in at 126,000 because that is what they said they were worth. Now, I don't believe that we really believe that, because when you hired me, we came back down in that. Those are all arbitrary decisions based on the information you have at hand, which might not have been the best at the time. If you have a salary plan in front of you, you have a range that you know that position is worth from point A to point Z, and you don't go beyond that unless you have a very good reason to do that. And it keeps you in line with all the other positions. You go too high on one decision, all the other positions below that are going to ask, why not me? So I think it makes for a much more professional evaluation of positions.
The mechanics of how this company is going to, what information are they going to base what they're doing on to arrive at a salary schedule or?
So they will do a survey of every employee that will be in this, and they will look at their qualifications, their responsibilities, how much budget do they control, how many people do they supervise, a whole slew of information. And it actually mirrors what civil service is looking at for the civil service positions. And from there, they'll figure out what the value of one employee is compared to the value of another. So they'll look at my job description and responsibilities and compare them to the county attorneys, to the treasurers, and see how our responsibilities are in comparison to each other, and then come up with a rating system. And they usually class them by letter. So they might say that these employees have a lot of responsibilities. They are like in class A, and they are worth a higher rate than the employees in a class B with much less, and they'll go right down to wherever the lowest rank. If you have lifeguards in there, their responsibilities are high, but they're not as high as maybe the public health director.
Do we have any input on? I don't know this company. I don't know their performance record, their history. What I'd like to do is look at the last 3 studies that they did and see if the employee won or the employer won. If out of 3 out of 4 times a big increase was paid out, to me that
I don't know that
I'd
for
like to see
sure.
where it was a balance of some sort.
I don't know what the increases were paid out right away when they adopted the study. I'm sure over the life of the study, it might be difficult to determine how you ended up there. I do have their completed study for Cayuga County. They gave me their whole thing. I did not hand that out. It was quite lengthy, but I have that available if you want to look at that study. And that was done in 2019. I know they did Steuben counties a number of years ago, and that was recently updated with another company. I think that's just because the former personnel director from Steuben County now works for this company. They probably didn't want to use her to do their own salary study.
Okay.
Well,
But I can try to find some of that information out for you.
I'd appreciate that. I just have reservations about studies like this. I'm concerned about the Board of Legislators giving up a duty that they really should perform themselves than to hire it out rather than do it ourselves. Have we had complaints from our?
Yes, I think every time you make a decision, especially at the end of the year where you take, the end of the year salaries, we might recommend a blanket salary of like 2%. And if you deviate on one person, you think they deserve a higher raise for whatever reason, I will hear an earful from every other department head that did not get that.
Because this is that group that's kind of in limbo. They're right below
Correct.
the department head and above the union.
Well, this would include department heads as well, so. And I think it would help your recruitment. I think it would help your just performance evaluation, everything.
I'm just concerned that it's gonna cause a tax increase, you know. But if you could give me that report, I could take a look at it.
Okay.
I'll try to keep a fair and open mind about it.
Mr. Crandall and then Mrs. Root.
Thank you. And first of all, I wholeheartedly support this. I think this is going to be money well spent. And I can answer some of the questions that have been raised here that I think were good questions. From experience for sitting here on this board for 20 years, I can tell you that there's been all kinds of approaches. I have tongue-in-cheek used the dartboard term numerous times as we sit down to go through these, and I don't think it's too far off the mark, at least at certain times. We have used a NISAC study comparison from county to county, but the problem that we end up in there is comparing a position in this county to a position in another county. They're not all the same. There's different hats, there's different responsibilities and tasks that are put on one and not another. This group would take and separate those out by the job duties and those descriptions so they can say, you know, this position in Allegheny County does not equal that position in Cattaraugus, Steuben, or another comparable county. We've talked about cost of living increase. We've had arguments on what index you use for those increases. We've had across the board raises that we don't want to do for one without the other. We've talked about compression when a department head is looking and employees are coming up on their heels because they're part of a negotiated contract that gets regular increases. I sat through and argued against a 0% increase across the board for our department heads and all our non-unit people one year, and fought hard to at least give something because it's going to come back and bite us, which it did. Then we ended up into a catch-up game. So the responsibility, although yes, it's ours as legislators to sit here and go through and come up with these salaries. For the past number of years, I've chaired those meetings where we have set up and had these discussions, and it's been very difficult to get to a professional end to that charge. So although it's our responsibility, this is utilizing that professional team that could come in and do the proper homework on our behalf and present that to us to then make the decision. And I personally wouldn't see if we get a study back and it says, you know, these, you know, a third of them stayed the same, a third of them got to go up and a third go down. And I use that only as a, you know, an off the top of the head example as they get into reevaluations, they use that type of term. We don't have to immediately adopt anything there. We don't have to adopt anything. You can say, well, that's not money well spent if we're not going to utilize the study. But I think you'll find that it is money well spent and we would utilize that. But some of those can be done by attrition and changes there. Some can be done over a period of time. So I don't see that as a necessarily gotta get it done tomorrow when those changes come in. But that allows you to put a plan in place that would have allowed this. So the other is the timing of this. This board is up for re-election right now. We all know what it was like to come in here on January 1 and sit at these desks and not have a handle on things. One of the toughest charges we have as legislators is sitting here and going through these 65 salaries and trying to come up with a reasonable way of approaching those. It gets dumped into the county administrator's lap. They come back with a recommended approach, and then we chew the county administrator out. How come you did that? So fully support it, and sooner the better. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Root.
Thank you. If you're looking for a resolution, I will make that resolution, and I want to say ditto to everything that the chairman just said. He took a lot of what I wanted to say and said it probably more eloquently. I don't look at this as there is a win or lose for us or for our employees. I look at this as legislators, we're doing our due diligence to provide the best information and service to our employees here at the county. I don't think any of us are HR professionals. At times, we have been in the dark room throwing darts, trying to establish salaries. So we have talked about this ever since I've been on the board. And I'm very pleased to see that we're moving forward on this. And I also think that the 2 add-ons would be very worth the money and probably save us money in the long run by doing that. And I support this wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Mr. Fenton?
Yes, I agree. It's going to be money well spent. I think a prediction would be that the 30,000 is going to be a small number compared to what it will end up costing us when we get done with this study. So, thank you.
Mr. Stocking, did you have something?
A lot of it's been said just here, but my recollection when we were doing this ourselves in the past was great frustration over evaluation of employees, and I think those add-ons would help tremendously with that, and then never really agreeing wholeheartedly on what the salary amounts were. It was very, very difficult, so I'm in favor of this.
Thank you. Mr. Healy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems to me that this would be a useful tool in recruiting for some of our key positions too as we go forward. And it seems like we always have a problem doing that, attracting good candidates for some of those positions. But I'd like to ask our HR director, Bob Budinger, if he's recommending this also.
I absolutely do. It's always a challenge when we create new positions, and we have new positions that we're going to be looking at, within the next 30 days or so. And we try our best to look at the knowledge, skills, and abilities, duties, and all the things that they're going to be looking at, and then looking at where they fall in line with the positions we already have. But if we already, over the many, many, many years, have gotten off, there's a lot of positions that are misgraded or we got out of whack a little bit. So when I'm making that evaluation and making a recommendation to this committee about where I think something should be, it's based on looking at where our positions are now. So if we're already looking at a salary schedule that's out of balance in some ways, the new position that we put in there might be out of balance just by that virtue alone. And again, I do think it's already been stated with our department heads. A lot of the salary recommendations, we do look at other counties, we look at all those things, but a lot of the decision making is based on that particular individual. And as the county administrator noted, there's a wage equity, hard to say, initiative that the state has right now that we're involved with. So they're taking a hard look at that. And I think we're open to, possible issues if someone didn't like what we were offering, because we have to justify why we offered someone one thing and another individual comes in and we're offering another. So I think there's a lot of reasons to do this. I don't think it ties your hands. You guys are the decision makers and you'll be able to make the decisions. So I do see it as information that you can use to make the best decisions going forward for our employees in our salary plan.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Budinger, and you're the professional in that field, so I appreciate your comments. Mr. Chairman, I just wondered too, as long as we got the county attorney here, if he has any thoughts he'd like to express on this, if he recommends this also.
I certainly recommend this study to go forward as far as liabilities to the county and the like. I have nothing to add at this point.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Dibble.
Yeah, question for the county administrator. The total cost, fiscal impact is $28,000.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry for the miscalculation earlier. I didn't have that sheet right in front of me.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Graves.
just some final thoughts here. I'm not opposed to the concept. I think it is a good idea. I've been through those discussions before. This isn't my first budget that I've been through, and the deliberations that go along with it. And I was also one of those employees at one time that was in that category where it was in limbo, and you were hoping that the employees got a big raise, the union won because that transferred over to us. What I'm concerned about is I just don't like the study concept. I think too much there's too much fog involved in the whole process, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to support this. I think that there is reason to consider it. I think it is the concept is good. I just hope that it works out to the benefit of Allegheny County. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I just have a quick comment. I think that this is going to be actually an investment. And I think that what we've been doing as we do HR, and HR is an art, by the way, I think, and we've been doing it much like somebody might be doing carpentry and doing it by eyeball. What we're doing here, we're buying ourselves a measuring device so that we don't have to eyeball our decisions anymore. We'll have some standard to put our decisions up against. And I think that that's going to make us more professional, and I think that we're going to be better off for it. It's just my comments. Are you looking for a vote on this?
Well, obviously,
Nope.
you've been looking at my carpentry work.
I have. I have.
Yeah, I'd be looking for a motion to move this forward for a resolution.
I did make that
Okay,
as a
that's what I
motion.
thought. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Burdick. Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Madam Administrator. Does anyone have any old business for the committee? New business? Good of the order? Stand by 1 second. Mr. Budinger, did you have something?
I did. Sorry, Legislator Graves. I'll give you that opportunity in just a few minutes. I just wanted to share some information. This will be very quick. As you may or may not know, there's been a lot of unemployment fraud, actually for quite a while now. So I just wanted to touch on that. We are not immune to it here in Allegheny County. We've been dealing with it for actually quite a while, as have the other counties in the state. So I just wanted to mention that to you, that we've had our share of it. My name popped. I got paperwork today for the county about unemployment claims. So I'm on there too. But I just want to let you know that when we get those claims, we do send that to the Department of Labor, New York State Department of Labor, and let them know that we've had a fraudulent claim come through. So we notify the state, we notify the employees. I know that I personally got notification of my claim about a week and a half ago. It just hit the county here today. So I'm assuming that a lot of the employees are seeing that as well. There is on the New York State website, there is a page you could go to that talks about the unemployment fraud, and you can file a report there too. So I'm assuming that you've heard about it. There might be employees and others that have come to you about that. But I wanted to reassure you, it's not just an Allegheny County problem. It's a problem that's prevalent everywhere. It's on our the personnel officer. We have a group chat, and that's been a big issue on there for many months. Hopefully it'll go away at some point. I don't know if it ever will, but I did want to bring that to your attention. And if anyone had any questions on that, I certainly would be willing to sit down and talk to you about it.
Okay. Mr. Crandall?
Just if anyone is notified of that, is there anything that they need to do?
Well, they can check with us to see if we've had we would notify the employee if we have that, but you could go to the New York State website, Department of Labor website, and there's a page on there. It's called, let's see here, it's the UI Fraud and Identity Theft page, and it has some information on there. And at the bottom, there's a little tab you can click on that says Report Fraud, so you can report it right directly to them. Again, there's a lot of it. It's prevalent. We've had 57 notifications here at the county so far. And I know that it's prevalent everywhere. So people are working hard to do bad things, unfortunately. I'm not sure what what the cure is to it, but I did wanted to let you know about that because you know, it might be brought to your attention. So we are aware of it, as is every other county and probably private sector too, I'd imagine. But that's how we deal with it, and I wanted to make you aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bettinger. Mrs. Burdick.
Once I am the victim of that at the town and the county, and I did the fraud claim, but how do you know that they're not using your identity or getting that unemployment claim? Because they don't respond to you after you file that. They just said they got it.
I don't know if I know the answer to that. I know I personally have received a notification from the Department of Labor saying that your name has been fraudulently submitted. So I actually received documentation from the Department of Labor that said that I was a victim of fraud. I don't know, again, I don't know if everybody gets that. I can only share my personal experience. I actually got that on one day, and the next day I got my benefits card the next day. So, but I did get something that has that. And again, our office, once we get that, if we had your name on it, we would put fraudulent, we'd send that to Department of Labor, and we'd follow up with you so you can maybe, you know, check your credit. I don't know if there's a good answer to it other than I think it's important that we just stay on top of it. And again, I got a notification that showed that it was fraudulent and that they knew that it was fraudulent. I would hope that that's the case for everybody.
Okay. Mr. Stocking.
I had the same thing well over a month ago and filed that, and I got the notice it was fraudulent. But the thing that interested me before they determined that, there was this email I was getting, you will not get this benefit unless you go onto this site and enter all your personal data, which I never did. So it seemed to me that it was dead end there unless whoever had done it had all that information, which I doubt, but I don't know. But I've never had any inkling in the time since that this was used in any other way for personal.
You're making Mr. Hooker break into a cold sweat back
I
there.
can add into that a little bit. I used Senator Borrello's office in Olean because I got a notice that I had an unemployment claim and that kind of thing. It came from the Department of Labor, had my name, and there was a partial Social Security number underneath it. Wasn't anything to do with the numbers in my own Social Security card and that kind of thing. But Senator Borrello's office was very helpful in straightening that out for me.
You have to be so careful. The crooks are out there to get you.
Yep, and we do get, in addition to the paperwork that has everybody's individual paperwork on it, we do get reports. I don't remember if it's quarterly or whatever it is, but we do get that with all the names of the people that we were supposed to be paying on, and I know that's checked. So again, the next time this comes around, my name shouldn't be on there because they know that it's fraud. But if it is, then we would have to contact the state again and let them know. So there is an opportunity to see if your name is still on there, if you're an employee of ours, down the road a little bit. So there is a mechanism to check that.
Wow. Okay. If there's nothing else, I think Mr. Graves made a motion.
Mr. Havey,
Yes.
Mr. Havey,
Oh.
over here.
Yes, I'm
Just
sorry.
real quickly,
Where are you now?
I am here. And I am noting the time of
Yes,
day and that I will ask that the Human Services Committee begin immediately following this adjournment. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for that. Okay, that was a motion. Do we hear a second? Or do you all want up? Mr. Harris, a second for adjournment. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you, everyone. Good meeting. We're adjourned.